Hi there, Alison here with another Cab Franc du jour. Today's wine is taking us to Bourgueil, and we're looking at the Aurélien Revillot 2020 Bourgueil Les Aubuis. Domaine Aurélien Revillot is a relatively new estate in Bourgueil, with the first vintage being in 2012. Aurélien is originally from Burgundy, and following his viticulture and enology studies in Dijon, he spent some time working in Burgundy, South Africa, and the Languedoc before eventually landing in the commune of Restigné in Bourgueil with the Callot family of Domaine de la Chevalerie in 2010. It was here where Aurélien's love and passion for Cabernet Franc really began to blossom, and it was what inspired him to eventually set up his own domaine in Bourgueil. Based in Restigné, Aurélien is organically farming 3.5 hectares of Cabernet Franc vines, and his parcels are dotted across the communes of Benais, Restigné, Ingrandes-de-Touraine, and Bourgueil. Now, what is impressive is that from these 3.5 hectares of vines, Aurélien is making 5 Cabernet Francs. And these wines include his Sur les Eaux, which is a blend from across multiple parcels on the côte, or the slopes. And he's also making 4 cuvées parcellaires, or single lieu-dit, or single vineyard wines. And these include Grand Mont, which is from Benais, La Bretèche from Restigné, Les Brunetières from Ingrandes-de-Touraine, and finally Les Aubuis, which is coming from the commune of Bourgueil, which is of course the wine that we are looking at today. While the majority of the communes in the Bourgueil appellation are on the east side of the Changeon River, the commune of Bourgueil is the only one in the appellation that is on the west side of the Changeon. The Changeon River flows from north to south, and then it takes this hard right turn towards the west, right around the hamlet of Santenay. And this part of the Changeon River is what defines the southern border of the viticultural area in this commune. We find 2 distinct terroirs here in the Bourgueil commune. We find the vineyards that are on the ancient alluvial terrace, and this is really what dominates the viticultural area here. And then we find a narrow band of vineyards on the côte, or the slopes. Now, the area of the ancient alluvial terrace starts just north of the Changeon River, so we're about 5 kilometers north of the Loire River, and it stretches just a little over 1.5 kilometers from north to south. And the vineyards here are dotted to the north and to the east of the village of Bourgueil itself. This ancient alluvial terrace is in fact a continuation of the same ancient alluvial terrace that begins in the commune of Restigné on the east side of the Changeon River and continues west into the commune of Bourgueil and then west further still into the appellation of St-Nicolas-de-Bourgueil. The vineyards here on the ancient alluvial terrace range in elevation from around 40 to upwards to 55 to or so meters above sea level. And this is where we find predominantly very, very deep sandy gravelly soils that sit atop the lower Turonian 2-foot chalk bedrock. The area of the côte in the Bourgueil commune starts about 6.5 kilometers north of the Loire River, so at the very northern edge of the Bourgueil commune. And unlike in Benais on the east side of the Changeon River, where the côte there is quite wide and the slopes more gradual, here in the Bourgueil commune, the côte is quite narrow, only about 300 to 500 meters wide from north to south, and the slopes tend to be more dramatic, more steep. So in terms of exposures on the côte in the Bourgueil commune, we find south, southeast, and even some east-facing exposures. So starting in the west around the hamlet of Chevrette, this is where we find predominantly south-facing exposures on the côte. And these south exposures continue for about 1.5 kilometers to the east. And then the côte starts to curve gently to the north, following the tree line of the forested area that is to the northwest. This is where we tend to find more southeast-facing exposures. And then the côte turns directly north and continues straight north, parallel to the Changeon River. And this is where we find more east-facing exposures. In terms of elevation, the côte ranges from around 60 meters to upwards to about 80 meters above sea level. And then in terms of soils, the côte here is dominated by clay-based soils, and we find shallower soils here as well. And we find both the influence of the upper Turonian yellow 2-foot chalk as well as the middle Turonian white 2-foot chalk. But the majority of the côte is on the middle Turonian white 2-foot chalk. Now, looking at the parcels for today's wine a little bit closer, this is from a single lieu-dit called Les Aubuis de Marseille, and this lieu-dit is located in the far northeast corner of the commune. So we are on a part of the Côte which faces the Changeon River. So we are on a full east-facing slope here, and the lieu-dit is around 10 hectares in size. Aurélien has about 0.6 hectares here, and his vines were planted in 1992. And in terms of soils in his parcels, Aurélien says he's got a variety of clays, yellow, white, even some iron-rich red clays in his parcels. And the soil is quite shallow, as much as 60 centimeters in some areas, and then very, very little in some areas as well. And it kind of depends on the little pocket in this lieu-dit. And he says as well he has both the influence of the upper Turonian yellow tuffeau chalk as well as the middle Turonian white tuffeau chalk in his parcels. Now, even though his soils are quite shallow in this particular lieu-dit, he does say that Les Aubuis, this wine, is really defined by the influence of the clay. Whereas by contrast, he says that Grand Mont, which is in Benais, that wine is really defined more by the impact of the tuffeau chalk. Now, from a winemaking perspective, the fruit for this wine is all hand harvested. It is all destemmed as well. And then the fermentation takes place in a combination of fiberglass and stainless steel tanks. And he's working with indigenous yeast. And the fermentation temperature reaches or kind of hovers between 24 to 26 degrees Celsius. The total time on scans is 5 weeks, and in the first week, Aurélien will do some remontage or pump overs just in that first week, and then the duration of the maceration and post-fermentation maceration is through infusion. So we're doing just a very gentle tea-like infusion or maceration. The finished wine is a combination of free-run wine as well as some press wine, and those are blended together before the aging, and the aging takes place in a combination of new and used oak barrels, 500-liter oak barrels. About 30% of that is new, and the aging is for around 6 to 18 months or so, depending on the barrel. And then following bottling, Aurélien ages this wine in bottle for 3 years prior to release. Now, just as a final note for the soil nerds out there, the term Aubuis is a collective term referring to clay limestone soils. The clays being decomposed limestone, and it indicates that there is some sort of impact from a limestone bedrock below. And that impact can vary depending on the type of Aubuis. But there's actually various kinds of Aubuis. We have Aubuis léger, light, Aubuis Loire, heavy. And this term, Aubuis, you find in different parts of the Loire, which is kind of interesting. But for those that pay attention to these things and kind of like to nerd out on soil details, if you see the term Aubuis on a label, that might give you an indication that that wine is coming from a clay limestone terroir. So, with that said, let's dive into this wine. Okay, so the nose is starting to open up really nicely, which makes me very happy. You noticed I poured this from decanter. I wanted to give this a lot of oxygen, given that this is a young wine, 2020 vintage, with predominantly clay impact in terms of the soils. I wanted to give this a lot of oxygen. So this has been in the decanter now for, I would say, probably 4 to 5 hours or so. So the nose is starting to open up, and it's coming through really fresh, really pure, lots of berries, like fresh, peak season berries. Raspberry, a touch of cherry. There's a little bit of black currant here as well. There's a nice underlying savoriness. I would like an herbal note that's coming through for me as more cooling herbs. There's a little bit of an evergreen note like fir. A little bit of a floral, a violety kind of note. A little bit of underlying spice, but for the most part, this leads with fruit and a lot of pure fruit, as well as a little bit of that underlying kind of savoriness or herbal nature. And really in general, and this is very much in keeping with Aurélien's approach and style as a winemaker, this is really all about purity, freshness. The fruit's really clean, very bright. It's very welcoming. On the palate, The same fruit profiles come through as they did on the nose. And what's amazing about the palate is I'm getting like this amazing fresh raspberry note, as if you took the freshest peak season raspberries, put them in a little bowl with a touch of sugar, kind of mash them with a fork to kind of macerate them and extract some of that fresh raspberry juice. That is literally what this is tasting like, is fresh raspberry juice. The herbals come through, the florals. It's a lot spicier on the palate, which is really nice. It's got a bit of a black pepper note. There's a little bit of a chili flake. There's even a touch of like a ginger, ground ginger note as well, which is kind of interesting. And I do sometimes get that with Cabernet Franc, is that ground ginger note. And for me, this wine is really showing that. And it's coming through a little bit just on the back end. It's this nice little warming kind of ground ginger note. While this is a young wine, it's showing a lot of depth. So already I can sense that there's some layers here. There's a little bit of like a dark chocolate note. There's a touch of like a damp earth thing happening as well. There's a little bit of even a little bit of a black olive note, which is really nice. The acidity on this wine is succulent. That is literally what I made, what I wrote in my notes earlier is succulent. So it has this juiciness, but it's even more than that. I guess it's this enveloping kind of acidity, which is really nice. It's very mouth-watering, really persistent as well. And that acidity kind of hits, I would say like it hits not so much the cheeks here, but more kind of the back of the jaw is where I'm feeling the acidity. The tannins on this wine are seamless, very silky in the mouth. And then the texture on the finish is super fine and dense, and and kind of compact as well. So when I'm tasting this and I'm feeling the tannins, it's as if I have a really fine tip Sharpie marker and I'm making very fine lines and creating this weave. And there's a great uniformity to the tannins, both kind of vertically and horizontally, and a fineness to the tannins, which is really beautiful. And it's creating this wonderful kind of plush, crushed velvet kind of texture on the finish. But Aurélien has just a gorgeous approach with tannins, and all of his wines just have this wonderful seamlessness to them and beautiful restraint as well. Yeah, so in terms of the profile of this wine, it is medium to medium plus body. It definitely sits more broadly on the palate. It kind of fills the mouth. It's enveloping, as I said, kind of that acidity in that succulent nature that it has. It's broad. It's quite round as well, which is really interesting. And even though this is a shallower soil, I do feel that sensation of that clay. You know, I'm feeling this compactness, this denseness to the wine, but at the same time, there's this beautiful acidity. There's this real gracious, sophisticated profile to this wine, which is making this wine feel really elegant. Aurélien has this amazing deft hand when it comes to his approach to winemaking. You really do sense that while there is attention to detail, there's precision, there's a lot of technical kind of energy to the wine that you can feel that it's really well made, but that never gets in the way of the beauty of the wine. And I really feel like Aurélien has this magic with regards to how he can take a step back and really let the winemaking be in the background and showcase that place, which is really beautiful. And I really do sense that with this wine. You know, 2020 was a warmer vintage, but this is a cooler site. You know, we have more clay, east-facing slope here, and I do feel that. I feel the coolness in this wine. I also feel that clay impact as well. And yeah, what can I say? It's kind of obvious that I'm a huge fan of Aurélien and his wines. I visited the Domaine almost 2 years ago now and was super impressed. Now, these wines are tough to find. The distribution is difficult because the production is quite small. But if you do find them out in the wild, please do yourself a favor and pick up one of these wines because they are really a beautiful example from the Bourgueil appellation. If you've had them before, do let me know what you thought of them in the comments below. And of course, as always, I will be back again soon with another wine. Cheers.